Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm not speaking to you.
This is going to be a short episode, isn't it? Oh, man. I actually texted Craig earlier this week and asked if he had seen the movie, and he said not yet. And I said I figured as much because I hadn't gotten a text from him yet that said, I hate you.
You were right.
Yeah, I'd been threatening to do a Troma movie here for quite some time, and Craig had never really seen a Troma movie. We did Death by Temptation a few weeks ago, and that was produced by Troma, but it wasn't really what I would call a Troma movie because it was just the financing that they helped out with. They didn't really have anything to do with the production, and they released the movie. So this movie that we're doing right now was my choice, is 2006 Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead. If you can't tell from the title what kind of movie this is, or if you don't know Troma, you might be a little surprised. So I'm going to go into my little rant here, my little spiel here about Troma. Troma is if you haven't ever heard of Troma, Troma is a independent movie studio that started back in the late 70s by two guys named Lloyd Kaufman and Michael Hertz. And they went on to become responsible for at least a couple of the more iconic characters that we have. Most notably, I think everybody probably knows The Toxic Avenger. The Toxic Avenger was one of their breakout success movies. It's kind of a superhero movie about a nerd who falls into a vat of toxic waste and becomes this mop-wielding superhero. And it was even made into a cartoon back in the 80s or early 90s, I guess. So a lot of people have heard of The Toxic Avenger, maybe through the cartoon or just from pop culture, but have maybe never even seen the movie. This movie studio, it is as punk. It's as punk as film really gets, I would have to say. Lloyd Kaufman is pretty much the spokesperson for this whole thing. He's directed almost most of the Troma, produced films. And he has a real sensibility about him to just make movies that are entertaining, movies that are never boring, and most of them are built around exploitation is putting it mildly. It's basically shock and fun and tons of comedy mixed in with whatever genre he's doing, whether it be a war movie, whether it be a horror movie like we're talking about today. Whenever you see a Troma movie, you're going to see extreme. You're going to see extreme everything, but I would say, from my point of view, it's always a lot of fun, and it's always tongue-in-cheek, and it's super campy, but it's campy in a way that just really works for me. Troma's got a lot of fans around the world, but I have this feeling that Craig's not going to be one of them.
No, probably not.
All right, before I turn the mic over to you, I just have to say, I have to put this out there. I saw my first Troma movie when I was maybe 10 or 11 years old. My dad had rented The Toxic Avenger for me, and we both watched it together. And I don't know who was more horrified by that movie, my dad or me. I'd never seen anything quite like it. It is super campy, but it's also really gory. And it was kind of a horror comedy before we had a lot of horror comedy, and the kind of horror comedy that it is a little different from the kind of horror comedy that I think we're used to, where we're cracking jokes and we're making fun of the genre. This really just mixes in a lot of dumb, juvenile humor with extreme gore and violence, and it's so funny to imagine that there's a Saturday morning cartoon that came out of that movie. But as a kid, it freaked me out. The movie freaked me out. It really stuck with me. And it wasn't until later, when I got to be a teenager and I got a little more interested in film and I started to seek out others of Troma's films, I started to really get a sense of their sensibility. And like I said, it's punk. It's total punk. These guys have been thumbing their nose at the establishment, making these movies regardless, get a huge cult following. Most of their movies are produced for like $500,000, and not all of them are successful. Not all of them make their money back. In fact, most of them don't. But they still manage to have this cult following around the world, so to the point where people will work on their movies for free. And that's the only way they can get them done so cheaply, is so much volunteer slave labor on these things. They're truly labors of love, no matter what you may think of them. So, Craig, what did you think of them?
Okay, so if I were a straight white 13-year-old boy having a sleepover with my buddies and we were like maybe sneaking a couple beers out of our parents' fridge or something, this movie would be awesome. Because every line is a dick joke or a poop joke or a I don't know, and there's like boobies bouncing around and great. Okay. See, like, here's the thing. I don't know how to approach this because I really didn't care for it, but I get what they were going for, and I feel like they totally accomplished what they were going for. So, how can you really be critical when they succeeded in what they were going for? It's meant to be raunchy. It's meant to be stupid. It's not meant to be taken seriously. And so I get it. I get what they were going for. It's just it's so stupid. I could just feel my brain cells jumping ship like
That's an interesting way of putting it.
If I were a recreational drug user, like maybe this would be a lot of fun. I don't know, but I don't know, Todd. I'm kind of at a loss for what to say.
This is so funny. I feel like I finally broke you. Because you and I are usually on the different sides of this. You know, you're usually the guy who says, "I love the raunchy stuff. I'm a kid at heart, and the juvenile humor doesn't bother you as much as it seems to bother me." So I don't know. I just have this big space in my heart for this kind of movie when it's done right, and I just think it's really funny that you dislike it so badly.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I don't want to be a stick in the mud. I don't want to make it seem like I'm, some kind of pretentious ass who can't appreciate a good dick joke. I like a good dick joke as much as anybody else. That's great. But when it's an hour and 45 minutes long and literally every single line is some kind of dick joke or
racist,
homophobic, and I'm not seriously, I'm not. I really am not sensitive about those kinds of things. Like when it's in good fun, which this is. I think it's in good fun. I don't think that these people are, legitimately, they are trying to be insulting in a certain way, I guess,
but not in a mean-spirited way.
Not in a mean-spirited way. That's right.
South Park kind of way, right? I mean,
right.
Like we poke fun at everybody, sort of thing.
But like times 100,
yeah.
I don't know. I just I'm trying to take notes over this movie, and I'm like, what am I supposed to write down? Like when every single line is a joke, like I can't keep track of all that. Like I don't even know. I don't even know what to single out. Like, oh, and then there was this funny part. No, it's not like, oh, and then there was this funny part. It's like the whole movie is a gag. Like the whole movie is a gag. And it's fine. Like, honestly, like, I should probably save this to the end. Like, this feels like a wrap it up kind of statement. But, and I've said this before, if you're a fan of ours and you've listened to especially our older episodes, you've heard me say this before. If I were having a Halloween party and I had a TV set up in every room, this would be a great movie to have on in the background because it's so ludicrous. And you could watch a minute of it and laugh. Or you could see what was going on screen and be like, wow, that's crazy and ridiculous. And that's fun. But to sit down and watch it for an hour and 43 minutes or however long it was a little much for me. And I told I told my partner, I'm like, I have to go watch a movie about zombie chickens now. And he was like, okay, whatever. And then I was watching it, and he was walking, back and forth
Oh
through the
no.
living room where I was watching it. And like, he would just see the things on the screen, and he would be like, oh my God, what are you watching?
He wasn't compelled to sit down and stay.
No. And this morning when I was getting ready to do it, he's like, "Are you excited to talk about your zombie chicken movie?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he was like, "Well, make sure that you talk about the butthole shooting out the poop part." And I was like, "Oh, you mean that one part? No, like that happens like 14 times. It's not like that's just one time. Like that is a major motif in this movie.
It
It's
is.
a close up of a butthole shooting out diarrhea." and like, of the hour and 43 minutes that this is, that probably takes up a good 10 minutes of it. Like,
That's probably true. There's a lot of fluid happening in this movie. I think the very first time I saw this, I do remember it feeling awfully long. And I don't know this time around if I was just in the right mood, or if because I knew the general story arc and I knew what was coming more or less. I mean, I only saw it once before. It's not like I've come to this movie again and again.
Right.
But I remembered it just seemed like the quintessential Troma film for us to do, because it kind of is distilled purely unadulterated Troma stuff. And you're right, it's a gag a minute. Not most of their movies aren't like this. I would say their later movies have become like this. And I think it's because they're competing against a society that's really crept up and done what they were doing much better than they ever did it. And so they've just got to go ultra extreme in order to compete anymore. If you look at South Park, for example, and there's actually a big Troma connection between Trey Parker and Matt Stone, and they were big fans of Troma, and they approached Lloyd Kaufman to help them with fund one of their very first films before they were doing South Park, called Cannibal the Musical, which is a fine little movie, and it's a Troma movie. Lloyd Kaufman didn't direct it, but it's very much a precursor to what South Park would eventually become in their irreverence and their kind of humor, their tongue-in-cheek nature. But they kind of took what Troma used to do and did it considerably better, a little more sophisticated, if that can be called. I don't really consider South Park sophisticated, but it's got its own sophistication,
Yeah, it's a little smarter. It's a little more on the pulse of contemporary pop culture and stuff.
Yeah.
Seriously, like, I get what they were going for, and I'm not going to say that it wasn't funny. Like, it was funny. It was funny, but, like, I teach high school, and I hear this stuff,
All the time.
in the hallways, and when kids think I'm not listening, and it just strikes me as juvenile. And, like, you mentioned Matt Stone and Trey Parker, or am I mixing up their last names? I don't know.
You got it.
They were supposed to be in this movie. The main character, Arby, talks about, and excuse me, like, I am a public school teacher, I don't use these words, but they were supposed to play his retard parents.
It's you ditching me for college.
I'm not ditching you, Arby. And I think you should come with me. There's still time to apply.
Wendy, my mom's a retard and my dad's blind. I mean, how am I supposed to take care of him if I'm off somewhere getting smart?
And it just didn't work out, like, for whatever reason. So I know that they're fans, and, they're smart guys. They're Oscar-nominated guys, and they know what they're doing. And so the fact that they draw inspiration from this type of thing, I get it. It's just... it was just a little much for me.
It's overload. It really is overload. You got to know what you're getting into with this movie, and I told you not to read anything about it. I purposely didn't want you to know what you were getting into. That's my fault. But we really shouldn't go beat by beat through this movie. I don't think. It's like
I don't
you
think
said,
you can.
You can't.
Yeah.
There's too much. There's too much going on. So let me just give a quick overview of what the plot is, and then we can kind of talk about some different points and pick out the things that we do like. I mean, there's got to be something you liked about this movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are some things.
So basically, it starts out. There's an ancient Indian burial ground in Tromaville, which most of their movies take place in Tromaville. And there's a guy and a girl in there. Her guy's name is Arby, and the girl's name is Wendy. Later on, we're going to get a manager named Denny, a dude named Paco Bell, a guy named Carl Jr. This is the level of humor we're dealing with, right? Because all this takes place about a fast food restaurant that gets built upon this ancient Indian burial ground. So it's clear that they're poking fun, and they do a lot of poking fun at different horror movie tropes throughout the movie, but definitely not in a sophisticated way. It's very much in a punch in your face, kind of way. They're dry humping in the cemetery.
Okay.
This scene we got to talk about. This is I like this scene.
I would say that this was my favorite scene of the movie, and it did a good job of setting up for what was to come. But I could have just seen this scene and been done, and that would have been okay. But no, I did like this scene. But I would much prefer to hear you talk about it.
Oh my gosh. All right. So anyway, Arby and Wendy are recent graduates from high school, and they're making out. And he says a line I think was hilarious. He says,
Gosh, Arby, you're the best dry humper in school.
Oh, thanks, Wendy. That's what the guys on the basketball team say.
Yeah, that was funny.
Anyway, she ends up taking off her shirt, and they're going to go all the way. So they're banging there in the cemetery. And at the same time, all of these zombie arms start popping out of the ground and start clawing at them, but they don't notice. The gag is, oh, Arby, your hands, it feels like they're everywhere kind of situation. Mm-hmm. One of the zombie hands pokes a finger right up his butt, and it breaks off in his butt. And but they're interrupted. This whole scene is interrupted by a guy with an axe. And I think all the zombie arms retreat into the ground at just that moment. And this guy with the axe comes against them, and she screams, oh, you're thinking he's coming to murder them. And she's like, what's that in his hand? He says, you mean the axe? And she says, no, the other hand. And he's jerking off with his other hand. And the movie, you'll see male anatomy or representations of male anatomy quite liberally through this movie, as well as female anatomy, and they run off, basically. And the next scene that we get is of the American Chicken Bunker restaurant on the site of this ancient burial ground. And there's a big group of protesters out there protesting corporate America in general. I guess in their small town, this chicken chain came in, and they're afraid it's going to push out mom and pop. It's kind of like the Walmart protest thing. And, that's sort of the thin thread of social commentary that this movie is built on, is this anti-corporate conglomerate message. And he comes back and to that site, and I don't know why he thinks he's coming back to the site. He wants to revisit the memory or something, but he's surprised to find that there's a chicken shack there, and he sees his girlfriend is in the protesting group, but she's making out with another girl, and that shocks him. And it turns out that she's a member of CLAM, the college lesbians against mega conglomerations, and he gets so upset by this that he goes into song. And so this is a musical as well. You probably weren't expecting that either.
That was the only thing actually that I did know, because the only thing that I did, usually when I'm preparing to take my notes, I go to the IMDb page and I write down the title and I look to see what year it came out, and I look to see what it was rated and how long it is, because I want to know what I'm in for. But right there underneath all that is always the, what genre it is, and it said comedy, horror, musical, and I was like, really? Musical? And it is. There are several songs. Surprise. I'm a big fan of musicals. But and this song, they're bad, they're badly written, but it's funny. It's a funny kind of take on a movie musical. The lyrics are so silly and stupid and raunchy and dumb, but fun. I actually enjoyed the musical numbers, I have to say.
Yeah, me too. They do feel like they were written by 12-year-old boys, though.
Right.
The words. I think the music itself could have actually been pretty good if it hadn't all been put together with, a synthesizer and a computer, more or less.
Right.
The sound quality of it all is kind of... it's just a poor mix. It's poor orchestration and all that. The songs are pretty solid for what they are, right?
Well, and that's the thing. Like the lyrics, though they are dumb, they are funny, and I think that the fact that they are set to music, because it's very much in keeping with the rest of the movie. Like the lyrics are what you would expect to hear in any of the dialogue, but because it's set to music, it just ups the camp.
When I rolled out of bed today, little did I know Wendy was gay. She dumped me for some hippie ho-oh, with hairy pits and a studded nose. She eats a snatch just like a pro, in a Jenna Jameson-like dyke porno.
So none of them are amazing singers or anything. Like, they're fine. They can carry a tune. It's fine. But like, they're like production numbers, like song and dance. Like, so you've got topless lesbians doing kick lines and like all kinds of crazy stuff. And that was funny. I seriously, I'm sitting here feeling bad about being too critical of it, because honest to God, like, they knew what they were doing. This is the type of movie they were trying to make.
And they do it very competently.
Yeah, right. So just because I didn't care for it doesn't amount to much. You know, if this is the kind of movie you're looking for, then, man, you're going to get your money's worth.
Well, that struck me more than anything else this time around watching it, is I was kind of in awe at the whole thing. And I know a little bit about the production history, and this movie was a bitch to make. This script had been around for years, and should be rewritten by several Troma employees. The final version of it, I think, ended up getting written by the guy who was a longtime Troma editor who edited this film. Lloyd Kaufman directed it, and they actually had a really hard time raising money for it, as they often do. Kaufman and Hertz both pitched in their own money, as well as dipped into some retirement savings in order to fund the movie, and sent out a call, and people from all over the world, quite honestly, like over 300 cast and crew members descended upon this place where they shot it, and all of them worked for free. I mean, most everybody on this movie worked for free, but the conditions were horrible because, they're cheap. They're cheap, and everybody had to know what they were getting into. I think they rented out. They shot all this at an old abandoned McDonald's somewhere near New Jersey or New York upstate, and then nearby there was an abandoned church that they rented out, and there were 70 people staying in this abandoned church while they were shooting this movie, and only had one working bathroom. And, people were dropping out left and right, but, there's a hard enough core group of people who wanted to be a part of a Troma film that they stuck through it and did this. So,
And I respect that. Like, that's cool when people get together and have a common vision and they want to get something done, and they're willing to put in the work for, peanuts or whatever. Like, that's cool. So I have a lot of respect for the people who were involved. And I can only imagine that this was really super fun to work on. I mean, not fun to be living with 70 other people in an abandoned church with only one bathroom, but to be putting something together and just having a good time. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So cool.
And coming around to my point, it doesn't look like a movie done by a whole bunch of volunteers on an absolutely shoestring budget. The effects in there, more or less, are quite good and abundant, all practical. It's shot on film. I thought, actually, the acting, they're all hamming it up. They're all pretty purposely hamming it up, but that can also flop. Not everybody can ham it up well, and I felt like more or less everybody was doing quite a damn good job. Like, I felt like you could probably take any one of these actors in this movie and maybe put them in a legit film, and they would be able to hold their own.
I agree. And another thing that I appreciated about it was that they're indiscriminate about who they're making fun of. They're making fun of kids, they're making fun of gays, they're making fun of black people, they're making fun of
Islam.
people with Islam. They're making fun of people with disabilities, but they have a diverse cast, and it seems like everybody's in on the joke, and it's just in good humor. It's not mean spirited. Like I didn't count or anything, but I specifically remember, that there's one cast member who is clearly really has a physical disability and is in a wheelchair, and like they just pop up in and out, and despite the fact that the movie is throwing around the word retard and talking about people with disabilities and stuff, I didn't get the sense that they were legitimately being disrespectful. I just thought that they were playing with these gosh, I don't know. They were trying to be
subversive comedy.
Yeah.
It's what it is. The court jester is the only one who can get away with, making fun of the king. Comedy has always kind of been in that realm, and that's why we can forgive. We used to be able to. Let me put it that way. It seems like recently we're having a really hard time with this.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go off on another tangent, so I might just end up editing this out later. But, I don't know if you've ever seen Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee with Jerry Seinfeld on Netflix. But, he talks with different comedians of different eras, and that seems to be this common thing that keeps popping up. It's about how it seems like comedians can't even do their jobs anymore because this subversive comedy just completely gets taken seriously, and comedians can't explore dangerous territory because then they get raked over the coals and, kicked off of projects and whatever. Their lives ruined by the social media mob. Somebody was offended by something. And now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think I'm not one of these guys that says PC culture is terrible, because there's a reason for it. We don't want to make fun of people and stuff. But there's a certain point where it feels like the pendulum has swung just a little too far, and we've lost a little bit of what we were able to give to, accept. You know what I'm saying?
I totally know what you're saying, and it is kind of a tangent, but I think that it's worth talking about. And I think that a lot of that comes from the fact that everything is filmed today.
Yeah.
Like, you're on camera all the time, and it's very easy to take things that you see in a video clip out of context. And comedians, it's kind of their job to make fun of people and to make fun of themselves too, and I get it. There are just jerky people who are legitimately nasty and mean, but then there are also people who are just trying. It's kind of the difference between laughing at somebody and laughing with somebody, and this movie, it didn't at all seem mean spirited to me, even though the language is coarse, and it describes or excuse me, it portrays some people in negative light, but it's just for comedy. We know that not all lesbians are militant, protesters or whatever. We know this. We're not stupid, but it's a stereotype, and it's kind of funny to exploit. And in the way that they do it, that group Clam or whatever. It's so silly. It's so silly, but it's funny. And then, so you've got a group of militant lesbians, have them all take their tops off and do a
dance number. Rubbing up against each other, making out probably like no lesbians ever.
Right. It's not real. No, I get what you're saying. And I wasn't offended. They're making gay jokes, and one of the jokes. Okay, so eventually what happens in this movie is because they built this chicken shack on an ancient Indian burial ground, they the gay Mexican cook ends up jerking off into the food grinder, and then he gets turned into like a sloppy Joe, which they call a sloppy Jose, which is also his name. He's Jose Paco Bell or whatever his name is. And then he comes back as a sandwich, as one of those sloppy Joes, and he talks
to Arby, Arby has gotten a job here to spite his former girlfriend.
Right, who's a militant lesbian now.
Now there is some bad shit headed your way, honey.
Oh my God, what?
By building an ACB on sacred ground, the General united two of the most disenfranchised races on the planet. Displaced Native Americans and the billions of chickens sent to the concentration camps. There hasn't been such a lethal combination of chicken and Indians since tandoori was introduced to the American people. If you fail, the virus will spread, and those of you who aren't infected will be relocated to free-range white meat reservation coops.
And so eventually there are zombie chicken eggs that start to hatch, and like there's all this craziness that goes on. But things like Denny, who is the manager, is black, and he speaks in kind of that really super stereotypical like plantation kind of accent. And then when he dies and comes back as a zombie as a zombie chicken, one of the girls is like, oh no, he's come back as a spicy Cajun chicken zombie.
Blackened
a spicy blackened.
That's
and
right.
it's so not PC, but that's clearly what they were going for, and it's funny. I mean, if you have an open mind and a sense of humor, and if you are not a racist, it's funny.
So anyway, so you're right. And so everybody's kind of eating this food, which is clearly disgusting. They're putting together this meal for this really rather large man. And I have to talk about this guy. His real name is Joel Fleischiger, and I think this was the last movie that he was in. But he is kind of an in-joke with Troma films as well. If you go to his IMDb page, you'll see he is an actor, but he has only been in Troma movies. And Lloyd Kaufman casts him as the big, morbidly obese guy, in all of the movies. And this guy, bless his heart, has no problem playing this role and being made fun of in all of these movies, and has become pretty endearing person to a lot of Troma fans. He's had a lot of fans over the years. He has one of the more disgusting scenes in this movie where he eats one of these eggs, goes into the bathroom, brings his food into the bathroom with him while his stomach is upset, and proceeds to basically shit a lot. That's putting it mildly.
It's so gross. We get camera angles from inside the toilet, and it's just this big, gross, poopy butt crack. I don't really need to see that.
Falls forward, and it's like spraying out his butt all across the walls and stuff. And I mean, he's naked. I mean, they don't use clever camera angles to conceal anything in here. If anything, they're just shoving the camera right where you don't want it to go. And Arby goes at one point into the basement and has an encounter with a mysterious man who looks exactly like Arby, except he's older. And this is Lloyd Kaufman, actually, doing a cameo.
Oh, is it?
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. I didn't know it.
Yeah, and
that's funny.
He's so goofy, and it's funny. I think one of the gags that really works in this movie is Arby is so stupid. Like, everything just goes right over his head, and basically he starts telling Arby his own story, and it absolutely mirrors Arby's story. He is Arby of the future.
You look young. I was young once, full of hopes and dreams, until... Hey, who's telling this story, schmuck? I was going to go to college, get a degree. But Mom was a retard, and Dad got blind, and Had to support him, so I took this shitty job at American Chicken Bunker and been here ever since. Huh? But I don't mind. Another 13 years and I'll have enough money to be reunited with my best girl at college. Wendy.
I had a girlfriend named Wendy, but now she's a lesbian.
Aren't they all?
You think he's maybe like a ghost or a spirit. At least that's sort of how it's presented. Like Arby's getting this vision of how he could be if he keeps working at the chicken shack. There's even a musical number about it.
Which I really liked. It's funny, I didn't know that this guy was the director. I just thought that he was the best actor in the movie. But no, yeah, I liked that scene. And it's funny, like everything, again, we are just skimming the very top of this because there's so much that goes on. Like Arby is his job is he's the counter girl. So
he wears a skirt.
So he has to wear a skirt and like stockings. And like when he and his older self are doing this number together, like this song and dance number, like they keep flipping up the backs of their skirts to reveal that they're wearing thongs. So, like it's just their butts and thongs, and it was a funny song. Like oh gosh, it's funny. It's so silly.
And if you're looking in the background throughout the whole thing, especially down here in the basement, like for example, there are all these boxes stacked up, and if you're really looking carefully, you see all these funny labels on the boxes, like chicken parts, or beaks and wings, or Vietnamese children, or German-style Luftwaffles. Just all these. It's like Mad Magazine.
Yeah.
The movie's kind of like an over-the-top Mad Magazine in a way.
That's a good comparison. And I loved that magazine when I was an adolescent. So really, maybe I would have liked this movie in those days too.
Yeah.
I'm just far too too mature for it now. I'm far too
Listen to you
I'm way
suddenly.
too sophisticated.
I've got this on record that you said this, and I'm going to be playing this back in a future podcast. Just so you know. Basically, what ends up happening is other people start eating this tainted chicken. The guy named Carl Jr., he gets... Oh, geez. I don't even remember how it goes down. But this poor woman, whose name is Hummus. They keep calling her Hamas. She's the Muslim joke of the movie. And this was not long after 9/11, right? This would have been 2006. So they had to poke kind of fun at that as well. She gets blamed for everything that happens because she happens to be there when people are dying. So she's blamed for the Mexican, but then they're going to cover it up anyway. And then she's blamed for this Carl. I don't remember exactly what happens to Carl, but he's feeling ill.
Get your bleep button ready.
Oh, that's right.
He fucks a zombie chicken.
That's right. That's right.
And it like clamps down on his wiener
and becomes
so
a monster.
Like he runs out into the kitchen and is like, get it off. And Hummus like tries to use a mop handle to like smack it off, but it doesn't work. And so the guy turns around and bends over. It's like, do something. So she takes the mop handle and shoves it all the way through his butt, out through apparently his wiener, and
which pops the chicken off.
So it comes all the way out, so it looks like a big wooden wiener sticking out of the front. And I thought he was dead for a while, but he's not. And like, it's just the little things, like I thought he was dead, and then he's not, and he wakes up and he says something like, look at the size of my woodcock, or something like that. And like it shows that the tip of his penis is like
still
on the tip of the handle. And then later he comes back as a zombie chicken and he's walking around with that giant woodcock.
and it gets stuck in a piece of equipment, so he can't get down the hallway. That's what saves the rest of them. It's kind of...
Oh, it's so silly.
It is silly. Oh, anyway, when he's coming out, I think he sprays a whole bunch of goop all over, blood,
Again.
whatever. Disgusting stuff is always spraying over everything. Sprays all over the chicken and taints it. In the meantime, the restaurant gets visited by the Colonel. So there's a Colonel-type character who found
Well,
the
it's
restaurant.
the General. He's
General.
not the Colonel. He's the General.
Right. He's
right.
the General.
And he has a whole song and dance number, and it's kind of funny, and it's about, like, he's singing with the militant lesbians, and they're singing about, like, corporate America and how it's destroying the mom and pop shops and stuff. And but the funny thing, he gets in there, and like these deaths are happening all around, and he just keeps wanting to like keep them quiet because it's the grand opening and there are these protests going on, and so there are reporters all around, so he just wants to keep everything hush hush. Eventually, after the wiener spray gets all over the chicken, his big idea is to just take all these buckets of chicken out there and give them to the protesters and the reporters, and so they'll get hooked on them, which works. But like the chicken, once it's been contaminated, is just disgusting. Like it's covered in like this green slime, and like it's got these boiling pustules that are like popping and like squirting juice out and stuff. The people are eating the chicken, and somebody's like,
"Hey, General, what are these tiny little bumps all over my chicken?"
Those are our new flavor pods.
I had difficulty watching this movie because there were several times when I literally thought I might throw up. Like,
oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Like when they were
imagine.
eating this stuff, and it was so gross. I can watch Freddy Krueger disembowel somebody and have no problem, but watching these people eating this disgusting food, I almost couldn't handle it.
What is he feeds some to Wendy's friend, what was her name?
Mickey, the lesbian. But she's not really a lesbian. It was a trick all along. She was in it with the General to just bring publicity to their grand opening or whatever.
That's the big twist.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon, basically, everybody's infected. And so then we just get this back-to-back big gory mess. This was just a major practical effects extravaganza with all these sight gags and all of these creative ways in which these zombie chickens were... these people who had turned into zombie chickens were taking each other out. I mean, there's so much stuff. Like a guy suddenly grows breasts all of a sudden, and when they take his shirt off,
that was my favorite one.
There are two eggs, and these two little chicks pop out of the eggs, and a zombie chicken starts feeding the chicks.
Yeah. Oh, there was all kinds of stuff. An old lady zombie chicken, and seriously, these are just people in moderately good makeup, beaks and feathers, they're half zombie, half chicken. This old lady who we've seen from the beginning, but now she's a zombie chicken. She peels this guy's face off, and then she sits down across from her husband, and she says, "I know it's full of fat, but I just love the skin." And she starts eating his face.
That honestly was the part that almost made me want to vomit. It's the little things,
and just silly things. Most of the people have turned into zombie chickens, but some of them haven't, and so the zombie chickens are chasing and killing the ones who aren't. And then there's one point where this male zombie chicken is chasing one of the lesbians, and she happens to be a very buxom lesbian, and she gets up and on the table, and her boobies are shaken, and she notices that he's enthralled by that or something, so she just takes off her shirt and just starts just shaking her boobs,
and he starts dancing too, and then we just cut away. I was like, wow, she figured out how to get away from this. It was so weird. There's no shortage of boobs in this movie.
No, all kinds of things going on. The employees turn into the zombie chickens. You've got the blackened Cajun chicken guy, and then the general turns into like this great big, like first he turns into a great big giant egg, and then he hatches out and he's this great big zombie chicken. And so they're fighting all these folks, and eventually Carl with the mop penis, he attacks, but they get him down. And Arby's like,
I know somewhere deep within the bowels of this creature you become lives the soul of the beautiful, racist, animal fucking inbred trailer trash I know and loved. So please tell us, how do we stop them?
Whiskey.
Carl, I need you to focus. First tell me how to kill them, and then I'll give you a drink.
Alcohol, Arby. Alcohol.
Fine, be an asshole.
and so the gag is that alcohol is their weakness because alcohol is the weakness of Native Americans. Like,
oh my gosh, it's so wrong.
It's so wrong. At some point, Arby doesn't get it because he's so daft. And then some more things happen, and like eventually Arby and Wendy, get cornered. They get cornered by a keg, and Wendy's like, "Look, Arby, beer," and he's like, "Now is not the time." And then he goes into this whole monologue where he reflects back on hearing all of these things, and it culminates in him saying, "Oh yeah, everyone knows Native Americans are fucking drunks." and then when it cuts back from his monologue, she has already tapped the keg and killed all the zombies, or like the ones that were attacking them. So alcohol is their weakness because they're Native Americans. And again, it is so bad. And there's even a joke where, like, obviously that's their biggest weakness. I mean, unless we have some smallpox around. Like, it's horrible.
It is horrible. But then he does, he turns to the camera and he says something very PC.
I mean, as soon as the Indians were tricked into becoming addicted to the white man's fermented beverages, it spelled disaster for these proud, proud people.
Anyway, then some random woman runs in and says, "Oh, my little girl is gone. Will help me save her." And they're like, "We have to save the little girl, the little crippled girl." And the guy, Arby, says, "Oh, she's crippled too?" And the woman says, "If that'll help." And so they end up in the basement of the chicken hatch, and it's like an alien knockoff. Like they're down there, and suddenly there are all these chicken eggs, and it's all spooky. And they find the little girl down there, and they're confronted by the giant chicken again. And the giant chicken's coming towards them. There's another song number and dance number, and just as he's about ready to strike, he starts farting and making all these strange noises, and he explodes. And it turns out that he couldn't handle Mexican food.
Right, because he ate the Mexican guy. Oh, God.
So bad. So, so they're all dead. There's a big song and dance number. Paco Bell has saved the day.
The only thing, I feel like we can't, before all this happens, Mickey, the faux lesbian, she thinks she's going to escape by putting on the chicken mascot suit, and she goes out, and we don't really know what's happened to her, and then she comes back, and she's in the chicken suit, but then when Wendy takes the chicken suit off of her, she's a chicken zombie, and then she tries to bang Wendy with a chicken wiener. She unzips her pants and pulls like this it's like a huge wiener with the chicken head. At first, Arby thinks that like they're just getting it on, and he's all mad about it. But then he comes back and he sees what's going on, and he grabs the chicken winger, the chicken penis, and he's like, "How do I get you off? I will get you off! I'll beat you off! Yeah! That's like being beaten! I will choke the chicken! I'm gonna choke the chicken!" And eventually the chicken, like, I'll just say, vomits on him. But at least it's clever. That was clever. I enjoyed the chicken wiener part.
Yeah,
all right, sorry.
Yeah. Once he's done, he just stands up, forgets about his girlfriend, says, "Well, I guess my work here is done."
All right. Okay. So back to the guy explodes and then they get away.
Yep, and the next scene we see is of Arby in the car, and his girlfriend is driving, Wendy, and the little girl is between them, and it's blue outside, and they're talking about what their happy life is going to be. And
Oh,
he gives
but the reason. Wait, hold on. The reason that they got away is because Hummus decided that she was going to sacrifice herself to get rid of all the zombies, and it turns out she's actually like a white Playboy model in a bikini with a bomb strapped to her back. And so when Arby and Wendy and the little girl run out, the whole place explodes, and Hummus has sacrificed herself. But the chicken zombies are dead, and it's all good. And so then they're in the car and they're driving.
He gives the girl a beer to calm her down. And as she's drinking the beer, she starts making all these noises, and she vomits up an egg. And they're like, "Oh no!" And they veer their car off. And this last scene is a big fat joke. It's a joke. If you've ever seen any Troma movie that was made since Sergeant Kabuki Man NYPD, which, by the way, is one of my favorite Troma movies, and it's also probably the closest thing to a mainstream acceptable movie that they've made. Anyway, they shot this stunt for this movie of a car that totally flies up in the air and flips over and then explodes. And that was a really expensive stunt for them. And so the movie that they did later, they just reused that footage. They worked it in. And as a kind of in-joke, ever since then, they have tried to work this footage into all of their subsequent movies. Even when they're not even driving the same. Actually, they're usually never driving the same car. But it's a huge joke. And that's how they end this movie, which is pretty funny if you follow Troma, that they would actually end the movie with that stock footage.
It's funny because I didn't know that, but I assumed that was the case. I assumed that they just pulled this footage from a different movie. Because
you could tell.
It doesn't look anything like the rest of the movie.
Yeah. So it flips over and explodes, and
everybody's dead.
Too. Yeah. The end.
And then there's a fun Poultrygeist song with a little bit of Michael Jackson Thriller choreography.
Yeah. What a movie, huh?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, again, every time we watch one of these bad movies, it's always so much more fun to talk to you about it than it is actually to watch it. But I don't know, it's an oddity, and maybe not really in the world of Troma, but this is the only one that I've seen. So it was an oddity for me, and it's just one of those things. Like I'm glad I saw it because
you're a completist.
Now I can say I've seen one, and I'm not dying to now go out and review their catalog or anything. But it was different. Did I enjoy it? No, not really. Can I appreciate what they were trying to do? And can I say that I think that they succeeded in what they were going for? Absolutely. It's juvenile. It's dumb. There are certainly entertaining moments. I particularly enjoyed the musical numbers. There were parts of it that totally grossed me out and made me want to barf, but I think that's what they were going for. And so, I'm not going to say that it was terrible because I think that they legitimately accomplished what they were trying to accomplish. And so I commend them for that. It's just not my bag,
Yeah. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say that maybe this is possibly the best movie they've ever made.
Wow.
Because it is so competently done. It's so funny. It's well acted. And set aside the fact that the humor is super juvenile and that it's super gross, visuals and things like that. The special effects are quite good for the most part. As far as practical effects go, they work. There's loads of them in there. The movie pulls no punches in either direction. It's not mean-spirited, I think, at all, like you said.
No.
I think it's just meant to be funny, and I think it is funny. It's not everybody's brand of humor. It's not even normally what I particularly like. I just think this combination kind of works for me. I'm not always in the mood to see something like this, but when I am, this movie really delivers the goods on all counts and manages to not be boring at all. I wasn't this time around. I really wasn't checking my watch. I really wasn't trying to see how long it lasted because I truly enjoyed almost every minute of this movie. I can't say I enjoyed it like that, not gleefully enjoying it, but I could say that it kept my interest. Is that a better way of putting it? It kept my interest for
sure, fair enough.
Yeah, every bit of runtime. It feels like they're $500,000. They milked it for what it was worth. Sadly, I don't think it made very much. Maybe it made a lot more on DVD re-release, but in the theaters it only made like $22,000 or something like that.
I read a funny story about how some guy went to a video store and bought what he thought was going to be a DVD laser cleaner, and for some reason, whatever reason, this movie was what he got, and he thought that it was so profane that he threatened to sue. But apparently it was like just a mix-up. The DVD cleaner was, packaged and somehow it just this movie got in there, and so nothing came of it. But like this guy was just incensed. Like he thought that it was like XXX horrible.
Can you imagine this guy who was so incensed? What he actually sat through it for an hour
right.
40 minutes. Oh my God, this is horrible. I've got to watch more. This guy wouldn't have gotten past the first 5 minutes if he thought it was really that terrible. Sounds like he's trying to get some money.
Yeah.
Well, Craig, I'm glad to finally introduce you to Troma Films. And,
thank you.
What a movie to do it on. They're most extreme, I think, really. They're most extreme. No, it's pretty representative of their oeuvre as a whole.
Well, and to be fair and to be honest, I'm glad that I know now. I've known about them for a long time, but I've never seen any of their movies, and now I've seen one, and honestly, if this is really representative and maybe, one of the best representations of what they do, at least now I know. I like to learn things.
You are a lifelong learner, a student of film. Welcome to Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead. All right. Well, it has been a lot of fun talking about it. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend. You can find us everywhere fine podcasts are sold or given away for free. And you can also find us on Facebook, where we have a page. You can like us there. Let us know what you think of Troma, Poultrygeist. What is your favorite Troma movie? I'd actually be really interested to hear that from our listeners. You can also go to our website, twoguys.red40net.com, where we have a huge back catalog of 139 episodes.
Holy crap.
Yeah, we're packing them in. So we got 139 more plus in the future, hopefully. And if you have any requests of movies you'd like us to do for one of those, please send us a message. Until next time, I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.